Hello there, and welcome back into the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. I'm your host, Sam Hind. Today, we're going to be talking all about social media strategy, and this is actually a part 2 episode. We recorded the very first part of this talking all about the research, the before we set up the strategy process. If you haven't listened to that episode, please go back and listen to part 1. It is so important not to jump ahead with this because the next steps that we're going to take are going to be pivotal on having some of that information that we spoke about in episode number 1 or part number 1. So I do highly recommend you go back, check that episode out. If you haven't located it, you can find it in the podcast show notes. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about part 2, which is all about the planning process. When it comes to social media, it's very, very easy to jump ahead and focus on the creative content side of things, which is all good and well, except that you will waste mountains of time. And let's face it, your time is very, very precious. In fact, it is your most precious commodity. If you don't do the work first and plan out what it is that you even want to achieve, let alone who you're reaching and what it is that they want to see. So in this episode, I'm going to be covering off on the final 3 steps of my 5-step social media planning process. And we're going to give you in the show notes a link to some downloadable blueprints, some little worksheets that you can fill in to help you with this process. So let's dive on in and get started and talk all about building out and planning your social media strategy. Okay, so let's dive on in to step 3. It's step number 1 of part 2, but it's step number 3 that we're going to talk about in this 5-part process. Of course, the first 2 steps we covered off on the part 1 of this episode. So step 3 is where we're up to right now. And this is one of my favorite processes. This is something that I do whenever I'm coming up with my social media strategy. I make sure that this part has been done really thoroughly and really well, at least once a quarter, but I sometimes do this more often than that. And it's what I call the social media brainstorm or brain dump. Now, first of all, before we do this process, I will say that you want to be in a fairly creative headspace for this to go well. You want to be thinking outside the square because there's not really a right or a wrong here, but you want to come up with some new, fresh ideas. Now, I'm going to help you with what these ideas will look like and give you some framework, but before you do this, I have discovered that we have got 2 very distinct sides of our brain that we operate by. We have our logical side, which many of you, like me, will spend most of your time working in. And then we have our creative side, which takes maybe some of us a little bit of effort to get into. Others live in that space all of the time. Different personalities work in different parts of the brain most of the time. Although we can switch from one to the other, we need to think about it or plan it or organize it. This all sounds very logical, doesn't it? You can definitely tell that I am in that part of my brain right now. But let's just talk about getting into your creative side. Now, if you're a little bit like me and you spend a lot of your time in the right logical side of your brain and you want to get over to that left creative side, you're going to need to do some things to help you do that. Now, here's what I do to get into my creative zone. Now, I've heard lots of people say, I need to take time off and have a holiday, and I definitely get back into that creative side. Now, you might not have time to do that or the money or the resource. So here's what I do to do it very quickly. If I'm sitting at my desk here like I am right now in my recording studio, I'm definitely in my logical side of my brain, and I'm thinking very logically. I am thinking about planning, strategy, organizing, business. That's where I'm at. So I need to get myself into a different zone to do a post brainstorm. So what I tend to do is take myself to a different location. Now that location, funnily enough, can be as simple as moving over to a windowsill in a different part of my office, using a different chair. It might be, and I've done this before, sitting in my car. I just kind of put my seat back a little bit, sit in a nice location overlooking a park or something, or I go outside and I get a piece of blank paper. I will say too, that whilst I've done this process I'm about to walk through with you on my phone in my notes section when, I really feel that that's all I have and I've just come up with some great ideas. But I do like to take pen to paper, and there's something very creative about doing that. So if you can use pen and paper or even some colored pens, if you're really into the creative side, then, get right into it. Have some fun with this. But I really encourage you, get into that space where you can think creatively, and you can just sort of do a big dump of some cool ideas. Now, when it comes to this process, this is all about we've done the planning, we've done the pre-work, we've looked at in the previous episode, what our business goal is, who it is that we're reaching, what they're interested in, all of that. Now what we're looking at here is what are some of the post categories that would potentially help us to achieve those goals and to build those relationships. Now, these don't have to be right. This is why I want you to do at least 10 to 15 categories. The reason for 10 to 15 categories is that it gives you lots to play with, lots to trial and test. In each category, we're going to have different ideas, little micro ideas, if you like. And I'm going to talk to you about how this looks and how it works. Like I said, I've actually got, and if you're watching the video of this, I'm just holding it up. If you're not, don't worry, I'll explain. But I do have a little worksheet I'm going to give you in the show notes. And included with that, I'll even give you my filled out version of this so you can see what I've done as I've done this brainstorm. Now, this one I actually did on a plane. It's another place I get really creative is when I'm flying. And I've usually got a lot of time to really think and play with ideas when I'm flying. So if you're a little bit like me and you tend to get a bit creative when you're in the air, do it when you're traveling or you're in the air. It's a really good use of that time. So what I've actually done here is I've broken it down into 3 things that you want to cover off with each category. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to think of a post category. This is like an umbrella or an overarching topic idea. So I came up with quite a few different ones here. I think I've got 12 in the example that I've given you guys. I've done my minimum 10 to 15. I've got 12 here. So I'm just going to rattle off what they are, and then I'll talk to you about how you do the process underneath. So I have things in mind like engagement questions and things I want to know. Behind the scenes, they're 2 different categories. Next category is motivation and inspiration. The next one is education. Next one is share. The next one is flashbacks. I've then got podcast. Next one I've got here is reels. That's one you should all have on your list, by the way. The next one I've got is funny musing. I've then got promote. I've only got one of those, just to be clear, one selling category. The next one I've got here is lead magnets. Highly recommend you all have a category for lead magnets. If you haven't done our training on that, definitely make sure that you join up to the next lead magnet training we do. And the last category I've got is live. Now, at the moment, these are all fairly generalized, but this is where the creative part comes in, and you can really, like I said, think outside the square here. The next thing, before we do the little brainstorm for each one, what we want to do is come up with our objective for each one to make sure that they're all relevant to our audience. So what I did was under each of those categories, I then wrote what my objective for that category was. It was kind of like a self-check, if you like. So, for example, with the first one, which was engagement questions / things I want to know, my objective that I wrote there was relate, connect, engage, and learn. So what I'm trying to achieve here is I want to connect with people and relate to people. I want to engage them on my page, but I also want to learn about them. So that's my objective of that category. Now that for me rings true with my audience and my business goals. So that's a big tick. That one is definitely one to test. But then the next part of writing out that category is then to come up with the ideas within it. So what are some of the ideas I could come up with that would potentially be a post idea that would fall within that category? So I just came up with some different question ideas that might fit within there. So I've said things like, asking questions around topics for training they might be interested in, potential podcast guests. I've said, identifying more interests that I want to know about them. So I could do that with, would you rather questions, or if you could have, do, or see any of the following, which would you choose? How do they prefer to learn? I could ask questions around, do they read, watch, or listen, and get creative around that. So there's lots of different ways that you can implement that particular post category. So what we're doing is we're brainstorming the overarching category ideas. We need 10 to 15 minimum 10, aim for 15. And then under each one, we're going to write out what is the objective of that category, and then what are the post ideas that fall within that category. So let me give you another example here. I've got category education. The objective is add value. It's really simple. I'm educating, I'm adding value to my audience. Tick. That's definitely a really great idea to help me achieve my business objective and relate with my audience. So some of the ideas underneath that one that I came up with were hot tips, social media updates, crazy trends, what's coming, how-tos, did you knows, bad habits and no-nos. So these are all post ideas within that. Now, here's why this process is really important, and it's really important to do it all in one big go, is because if you stop and start this process, you can imagine, especially if you don't live in that creative side of your brain, you can imagine that you can get a little bit stuck. If you are feeling a bit stuck, get up, move your body, go somewhere else, try a different location, maybe set a different time and see if you can get yourself into that space. Doing something as simple as listening to some music that, just gets your juices flowing. Get yourself out of your normal logical work zone. This is a really fun process, to have some fun with it. But the idea here is we're coming up with all of those ideas so that when we sit down each week to strategize our social media, to create our social media plan, what we want to be doing here is pulling from this brainstorm each week. So the idea is that when you create the content, you don't have to be in that creative mindset because you've already done the ideas. Now you're just using this and you're pulling from the brain you're pulling from that space where you were in the zone. So what I found over the years is, and you might have found the same thing, if I rely on every time I've got time to sit down and do my social media planning for the week, if I rely on being in a creative space at that time or even being in the mood to do it, then it's kind of gambling a little bit. And, the results in my business will reflect that. Whereas if I've already done most of the pre-work and all I have to do is pull from the ideas I've already come up with when I was in the right space, then it makes that process so much easier. The other thing is that when you sit down once a week for those 2 to 3 hours to plan out your content, which we're going to talk about that, you've already done most of the work. So you can really spend that time just creating the post, which should be really simple, especially if you use Auxano Social, and then scheduling it in, and you'll get so much more done. So doing this process effectively is going to be a really powerful tool for you in your tool belt. So that's the post brainstorm. We're going to come up with category, objective, and the ideas within, and we're going to do 10 to 15 of those. The next is step 4, and this is the content creation space. Now, whilst this sounds like it's the creative zone, really, I'm going to let you pull on all of the tools that you've got available to you from us. All of our Accelerator members have got access to our social media scheduling tool called Auxano Social. Now, I'm going to do a great big plug here for this because we don't usually talk about it on the podcast. But because we recognized that when it came to creating your social media content, for so many of you, you really want to have some inspiration and a lot of that hard work done for you so that you can really be super productive. We wanted to create something that would give you the space to bring your personality in, but save as much time as possible. So we introduced in 2022 a new platform for all of our Accelerator members called Auxano Social. Now, Auxano Social allows you to create your content and schedule it in seconds. Reason being is we've already created over 15,000 pieces of content for you that you can edit and add your personality to. You can also, because this platform is connected with Canva, you can also use Canva directly through the platform to create brand new posts really quickly and really easily. So that means that you can either use the content we've already created just for some inspiration and ideas, or you can flat out just use that content. The beauty of this is you can add then your own caption to the post itself. So it's definitely got your wording, your language, your personality there, and schedule it directly from the platform to any social media platform that you're using. This is really powerful. We've even got some video tools in there as well that have been released early 2023. So if you want to know more about this and you want to know more about joining our Accelerator membership, where Greg and I do a live training every single week with you to help you with your social media journey and much, much more. We're going to put the link into the show notes for you so you can find out all about that. Our Accelerator membership at the time of recording this podcast starts at $49 a month. There's no lock-in. And when you join us, you get a 2-week trial where if you don't love it, you just email us and we'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So the idea is you get in, you give it a go, you play with this platform and you're away. Okay, so that's the plug there, but let me talk a little bit now about the content that you create. Now, our recommendation when it comes to successfully scheduling your content is to plan it out each week. Now, if you want to do this fortnightly, you can, but here's how I suggest it's done if you want to really do it at its best. Sit down and plan into your calendar a session for 2 to 3 hours once a week. Now, I'm going to really urge you when you create your content, please do this in one session. Don't be tempted to do half an hour each day over the week. The reason is it will become something that you put to the side because you get too busy doing other things. By the time you then get into the zone, you've already run out of time. What I suggest that you do is find a time once a week. It might be Friday, it might be Monday, whatever works for you. It could be on the weekend, but find a time that you can block out a minimum of 2 hours. And if you don't use them all, that's great. But I really suggest start with a minimum of 2, even 3 if you can find that, and make that your social media scheduling time. Now, in that block, what you're going to do is you're going to go through your strategies, and then with another downloadable cheat sheet that we are giving, all of our Accelerator members have access to, they've all got our social media content planner. Now, you can do this just in your diary. That's completely fine, but we do have one here that you can print out and fill in each time you do this process. And what you want to do is you want to map out each day which strategy that you're going to use, which of the ideas within that strategy. So which of the categories are you pulling? So you're going to pull on the education category. And for this post, we're going to go with a hot tip, right? So you jot this down on your map or your calendar in front of you. And then what I've actually got here as well on the calendar that we use, you can see I'm holding up one that I have filled in because this is how I do it when I work with our Rise Up Inner Circle members. I'll then write down which platform I'm going to use that strategy on as well. So this may not be relevant for all of you, but if you're using multiple platforms, I suggest that you map out which platform you're doing. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to go Monday the 1st. This is the strategy or the category I'm going to implement. This is the idea within that category I'm going to trial out on that day, and this is the platform I'm going to use it on. Then if you're doing a second platform that day, then you can add that in as well. And then you're going to move to the next day. Now, you do this first before you create the content. Here's why. Because if you go straight to getting creative with the content, it's kind of like the rabbit warren of distraction. What can happen, and I have fallen into this trap many times, I know you probably have too, where you start creating a post, but then you find a really cool post idea or picture and you suddenly get distracted and think, I'd really like to use that on my platform instead. And you start creating a new idea, a new post around that. Then you find another photo or another caption and you think, oh, actually, I'm going to go and create that too. Then you think, oh, here's another thought, another idea, and you end up going over here. And if you're anything like me, you get 20 minutes down the track and you've still not created a single post. Let alone the idea that you're now sitting on has got nothing to do with anything you pre-planned, nothing to do with any of the ideas you've already written down, and you've got caught up in the distraction of the creative. So what we do instead is we plan out what we're going to do on which day, just the loose idea. It doesn't mean you have to have the exact idea in place because you're going to do that hopefully within Auxano Social, but you might do it in whatever scheduling platform that you use, and it will be much quicker and easier. So, for example, on the 25th of December, and I'm looking back on my map here, so this is a slightly older one, but it gives you a bit of an idea. I said my strategy was going to be a video. My idea was Christmas related, and I was going to put it on Facebook. Now, I had a Christmas video we had created, which is what I meant by that. Then I had a strategy behind the scenes. Idea, Christmas decorations in the office, platform, Instagram. So what I'm doing is I'm coming up with the idea in advance. That way, when I go to schedule it, it's going to be really quick and easy because I've already mapped it out. Then the following day, on the 26th, I've said here, the strategy is flashback. That was one of my strategies. The idea is gratitude. So I'm going to flash back on some gratitude from the year, and the platform was Instagram. Then on the 27th, the strategy was educate. The idea was hot tip. And then the platform was Facebook. So basically what I'm doing is I'm mapping this out in advance so that when I go to do this content, bang, 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 done, dusted, we're scheduling it and we're head to go. Now, when you schedule your content, aim for minimum 7 days ahead, because if you're doing this weekly, you're not going to be coming back to it for another week. What you don't want to do is leave yourself hanging so that you're required to create anything on the fly. If you do things on the fly, strategy out the window, gone, gone, gone. All right, because you are not going to be in the right headspace. You're not going to have all of this work that you've pre-done in front of you. You're going to be distracted in theory and probably not have the time to allocate to it. On top of that, and this is what's really important, we're going to get to this as step number 5. This is the most important step of the whole process, is reflect, assess, and rework. So if you're doing things on the fly, you are not going to be paying attention to what worked last week and what didn't work. You're going to be just throwing the same old stuff out there because you are just going through the motions. This is why planning ahead by at least 7 days, but I would recommend if you can get yourself 14 days ahead at all times, what will happen is if you do come up with something on the fly that's super relevant to your audience, it ticks the box that it's going to add value for them. It falls within your strategy and your objective and your business goals, and you want to get it out there, but you've already scheduled something for today, then you can move what you scheduled in for today to next week. So you push that piece out and slot in this bit that you've just thought of, or that's just come up, or this thing in the moment. So what I'm basically saying is you're not relying on those ad hoc things that happen, but if something happens that will be valuable and useful to put out there that's current and in the moment, you've already got a piece of content you can shift, or you can go 2 in a day if you really want to, but then you can plop in the thing that works for today. That way you are not relying on those things happening, but you've got the space for them to happen if they come up. So plan a couple of weeks ahead if you can, and then each week you only have to do another 7 days. That's the ultimate, okay? Where this all falls down is when you don't do one of 2 things. Either allocate the time and protect the time in your calendar, or you do not look back on what did and didn't work. The last part of this process is I actually go back to last week. So when I go to plan out my planner the following week, so I've done this week, 7 days has passed, and I sit down for my next session, I actually go back and I looked at the things that I scheduled in over the last 7 days, and I go into my Facebook or Instagram insights and I just take a quick glance at their performance. And I have a look at patterns. I look at things that are going to tell me or indicate to me, because your customers are talking to you all the time through their actions, what's got good results, what hasn't, and what do we not really know about yet. So when you get one particular post that gets lots of interaction or clicks or whatever that might be, then that's a good indication for you that that particular piece of content worked well. So you might want to try it again. Try a different version of that category, another idea within there, or rework the one that you did. Put it in again in a couple of weeks' time. Give it another go. But if you see something that consistently is flatlining and just not performing very well in comparison to your other content, then you're going to throw something else out there. You're going to mark that one down and say, look, I'm going to peg that one to the side for a little while and we're going to try something else. That's why you're coming up with 10 to 15 different categories, because if you only come up with 7, then you're a little bit stuck if one of them doesn't perform very well. You're going to have to come up with some new ideas. So when you're doing that brainstorming session, come up with more than what you need, because guaranteed not all of them are going to be performers for you. Just remember as well, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So if you get a little bit stuck, have a look at what other similar businesses or people do, anywhere in the world on their social media. Have a look at their content ideas and think, how can I make something like that my own? How do I put my own stamp, my own personality, my own voice on that? How could I test that style of content myself? So having, I guess these downloadable sheets and things that you can use is really handy. You don't need them. You can, simply do this on a blank piece of paper. But the main thing is making sure that you go through this process doing the pre-work first, so that you actually in the long run save yourself as much time as possible. Now, whilst this may sound like a fairly in-depth process to go to, let me promise you something. You are going to save yourself, first of all, oodles of time in the long run, because you will be getting so much, the results you'll be getting will be so much better. You'll also feel a lot more confident that there is a process and a procedure to what you're doing. So if something's not working, you're not going to be constantly banging your head against a wall thinking, how do I get results? You will always be making progress. I guarantee if you do this process I'm giving you, you will be making progress even if you haven't cracked your own code yet. It can take time, but this will work it out for you. So let's just go back and look at what those 5 steps are again. The first 2 that we covered off in part 1 of this series, if you like, was what's our business goal? Getting really clear about what it is that we want to achieve. What's social media even here to do for us? The second part was identifying and researching our dream customer, because we can't put content out there if we don't know what it is that they want to see. And if we do, we're wasting our time. So that's part 1 and step 1 and step 2. In this episode, we covered step 3, which was the brainstorm. That was coming up with all of the ideas in a creative mindset to start you off with. Step 4 was creating the content. And I said, I've noted down in this, create, schedule, test, and repeat. Create, schedule, test. Do that each week. And then the last part, which is step number 5, is reflect, assess, and rework. So each week, just really quickly look back. What worked? What didn't work? What do we need to put to the side? What are we going to try again? What are we going to adapt and adjust? If you follow these steps each week when you do your content planning, I absolutely guarantee you not only make progress, you will be learning and you will succeed at social media. These are the 5 steps that any marketer, any social media or digital marketer follows to the T. And you know what? I actually think that this is more detail than many professional marketers go to. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't, but I really truly believe, and I'm probably stepping on some toes here, that even some of the professionals out there don't follow these steps through thoroughly, and they still get amazing results. So if you follow these steps through, even if it doesn't get you instant results, you will be learning, you'll be adapting, you'll be adjusting, and I promise you, you will work out your code. You will work out how to connect and communicate with your ideal customer. I guarantee it. So that is the end of social media planning, how to create a strategy that works. I am so excited to hear from you. Of course, if you want to know more about our Accelerator membership and doing live training with Greg and I each and every week where we can interact with you, support you on this journey, and grow your direct selling business with you, whilst also providing you with literally dozens and dozens of downloads, blueprints, cheat sheets, as well as hundreds of training videos. And on top of that, you've also got access to the Auxano Social platform that gives you over 15,000 pieces of ready-made social media content, the ability to schedule it to any platform, and notes and suggestions from myself and my team every single month to help you on your journey, as well as many other tools, including Reels, video editing tools, and much, much more. If you want to find out more about getting access to this amazing membership and joining our incredible community, our Auxano family, if you will, I'm going to put the link in the show notes, and we would love to hear from you. If you've got any questions around this, you can always email us at grow@auxano.global, and we would love to answer your questions. If you want to jump in and join us, just remember, you've got 2 weeks to let us know. If you don't love it, you get a money-back guarantee. That's it from me for today. I'm so excited that you tuned in for this episode. I hope that you found this incredibly helpful, and I look forward to seeing you on the podcast again next week. But God bless, and bye for now. Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. If you love listening and you found that this was helpful for your direct selling business, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check out the recommended video that's popped up on your screen right here. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye for now.